All right. Well, welcome everyone to the traffic calming meeting for East Cedar Lane. My name is David Greaves. I'm an engineer who works with NDOT on a lot of traffic calming projects in Nashville. Um, we're meeting tonight virtually on WebEx. It's November 11th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Um, and this is a recorded meeting that will be posted to YouTube in the next couple of days. So if there is anyone who wasn't able to make it tonight, this meeting will be available. Before we get going, just want to let everyone know we'll pause a couple times for questions throughout the presentation, but there's also a chat feature in WebEx. So if you think of anything you'd like to ask, feel free to use that as well. I'll see it. And then we have a pretty small group tonight, so if you do want to come up on off of mute and speak up, that's just fine. I don't think we'll be derailed by that by any means. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're going to start by just doing kind of a brief overview of the traffic calming program in general before moving on to talking about some of the specific design options we have, and then ultimately reviewing a sort of draft design that we've put together and we'll take some feedback on. But traffic calming in general is a program that focuses on residential streets in Nashville. It's one that prefers physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. Essentially what that means is we're not doing these projects like one block at a time. We try to make them an appropriate size so that the traffic calming effects work over the course of a street rather than just in one particular spot. And the primary goal of this program is speed reduction. That's both for quality of life as well as safety. And we'll review kind of how that ties into safety in just a minute. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. You'll notice that engineering is bold and underlined here because that's really the E that NDOT has the greatest ability to affect. Essentially, what we'd like to do is an engineered design that will encourage safe driving at all times, whether or not a person is intending to drive safe or not, or whether or not there is enforcement around. So essentially, we try to educate as much as we can. Certainly, Metro Nashville Police Department enforces speeds when they're able to. But when we design the roads safely, hopefully those other two aren't quite as necessary. Speed ties into safety with this infographic that we have here. So this is all, of course, under the larger NDOT umbrella of Vision Zero, which, if anyone doesn't know, is the idea that nobody should have to be killed or seriously injured on Nashville streets. The reason that speed is so important in that equation is a pedestrian that is struck by a car going the speed limit, 25 miles an hour on most neighborhood streets, has a pretty good chance of surviving. That's that 89% off to the left. That chance of surviving does go way down once we start getting towards 35 miles an hour and then really high at like 45 miles an hour. Should a pedestrian be struck by a car going that fast, they only have about a third a chance of surviving. So when we see streets in Nashville that are neighborhoods and are experiencing really high speeds like that, that's a good indication that it's an opportunity to design the street a little bit differently to encourage safer driving and hopefully avoid tragedies that way. This is a program that is in really high demand. So in March of 2023, that was a while ago, but there were 480 streets in the traffic calming queue. Now it's up a little closer to like 575. And every 6 months, we do select 25 neighborhood streets. So East Cedar Lane was selected this fall, along with 25 other streets that had applied. And because of that, you'll now show up on this map off to the right This is a screenshot of Nashville's live traffic calming tracker, and we'll take a closer look at that in just a minute. There are a few options that we have as a traffic calming program to address speeds on your road, but there are a whole lot of projects and treatments that we don't do, but NDOT does. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware that Hub Nashville is a good place to make any requests that maybe we can't fit into this project, but you'd still like to have a record of having requested it. That could be things like signals, stop signs, sidewalks, or even something as simple as like fixing a pothole in the road. All of that can go through Hub, and it can be accessed by calling 311, going to hub.Nashville.gov online. And there's also a smartphone app that's pretty easy to use. That's my preferred method since it is pretty user-friendly. So I just want to make sure that's understood before we jump into the design and tools we're talking about tonight, because certainly NDOT does more than just traffic calming, but we've got a fairly limited palette to work with tonight. So a little bit about how East Cedar Lane was selected for traffic calming. We use a data-driven process, which means when a street applies, we collect several data points about that street. So we'll take a trailer out there to measure vehicle speeds and volumes. That's counting how many cars are using the road on a particular day. We also look at the crash history. So that's the vulnerable user injury or fatality. Certainly, we'd like to know if there's already been a crash on your street. That should increase its chance of getting chosen. Non-driver accommodations are essentially sidewalks. So if you don't have any, and we know that pedestrians will be sharing the road with cars, we think that's a good reason to ensure that they're driving safely. And then trip destinations are things like libraries, parks, and schools. Just land uses nearby that we know generate pedestrian trips, and in so doing, we want to make sure those pedestrians are safe on the roadway. You'll notice that vehicle speeds and volumes are by far the highest percentage put together. The reason for that is we think that those two items combined are really what generate the danger that traffic calming as a program seeks to address. So those are why those two are more impactful than those other three. But we do like to consider all of those factors when we're ranking the streets. Some specifics about East Cedar Lane that kind of fit into that pie chart. We measured an 85th percent speed of 36 miles an hour. The volume was 320 cars per day. And we also consider the street width, not for prioritization, but in our design and some of the tools that we select that we can talk about in a few minutes. For anyone who doesn't know, the 85th percent speed is just a metric that states 15% of drivers that were measured were going faster than that number, and then 85% of drivers were going that speed or slower. So it works kind of like the median. It's not an average, but it's a conservative normal speed that is being observed. This is the map of the project limits we have. Basically, the whole street was applied for, so we are seeking to do traffic calming on the entire length. It's not super long, just a couple of blocks, but that definitely doesn't mean it's not being used significantly. So with that, I want to take our first pause for questions. Does anyone need to go back to any of the slides or have questions about what we've talked about already? Next, we're going to jump into the tools and then the design.
Hi, this is Andy Eltoff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm on by phone, so I cannot see your slides. Can you just clarify from what is it from Neely's Bend to Cumberland Station Road, or does it go down by the elementary school?
Yes, so it is from Neely's Bend to Cumberland Station Road.
Okay. And I've lived here 4 years. I'm just off of that road, and I'm not aware of any accidents, although certainly there are speeders.
Got it.
Have
Yeah.
there been a number of accidents? And also, we do have sidewalks, which is bizarre, I know.
Well, that's good. So I'll clarify a little bit. The pie chart I showed earlier is not all of the things that made East Cedar Lane chosen for traffic calming. It's just a breakdown of how we do the scoring. So
Gotcha.
I can check, but I don't think that you all had any of those pedestrian injuries or fatalities go into that score. But that just means that the speeds or volumes or some other factor was a little higher.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll try to be deliberate about describing more of the visuals that we encounter, because I
Appreciate it.
realize not everyone's looking at our screen.
Okay,
Anyone else
thank
before we
you.
move on? Okay. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and get into some of the tools we have in the toolbox for the program. The first one that we talk about, because it is sort of NDOT's bread and butter in the traffic calming world, definitely a feature that most of our designs include, are speed cushions. These are modular rubber devices that are designed to work kind of like speed bumps, but they're stretched way out to lengths of 7, 10.5, or 14 feet. The reason that they're stretched out like that is, unlike speed bumps, we're not hoping that vehicles go over these at like 5 to 10 miles an hour, like you might be driving in a parking lot. These are really designed to get people to drive over them between 20 and 25 miles an hour. So they're not really like slowing traffic down to way below the speed limit. Essentially, the goal is to encourage drivers to go the speed limit while they're traversing these. They're about 3 inches high and they're 6 feet wide. And when we install these on roads, we include small gaps between them. So there's sort of in a row across the span of a street. And the reason for that is it can help reduce the impact to emergency response vehicles, which tend to have wider wheelbases than our personal cars. So a fire truck whose wheels are further apart can more or less shoot the gap. I think they do hit the cushions a little bit, but they've got those kind of tapered edges so they don't have to go way up and over. Whereas a truck or an SUV, a sedan, they'll all interact with these more so than that. So the design of these is pretty deliberate. That's sort of what's going on there. And that combination of affecting personal vehicles while not affecting emergency vehicles as much is kind of why these are the go-to. We do also have speed tables. So these are installed sometimes. Generally, it's if we have kind of an awkward width of the road where we're not able to comfortably put in speed cushions at a spacing that we like. And then we're more comfortable putting these on roads that don't access a lot of other areas. So if your street was one that an emergency vehicle would need to use to get to another street, we would be a little more reluctant to install these just because they don't have those gaps in that same reduced impact. I mentioned that vertical measures are sort of NDOT's preferred method of traffic calming. And the reason for that is they have studied a number of ways and determined that these generally are what works best and most consistently. So what we're looking at here is the results of a study that NDOT performed before and after on 6 traffic calming projects, where the average speed was shown to be reduced from 31 miles an hour down to 22. And that 85th percent speed that we talked about earlier, that came down from 37 miles an hour all the way down to 25. So on East Cedar Lane, your 85th percent speed, we measured at 36. Hopefully, if our design is effective, we would see those speeds come down to the speed limit, which I think would be a safer environment for everyone. Vertical measures don't work well everywhere. Certainly on steep hills and like curvy roads, places with a lot of driveways that we don't want to impact. Um, we aren't able to do cushions at a spacing that we think will fully handle the job. So in those instances, we can also use things like radar feedback signs. I think everyone has seen these before, but essentially what it is a yellow sign below a normal speed limit sign, and it'll take a radar reading as you approach the sign and flash your speed back at you. Um, it doesn't enforce the speeds in any way, so it's not taking your picture. Certainly, it's not writing you a ticket, and it doesn't physically affect the vehicles really at all. So the main difference between this and something like a speed cushion is a speed cushion is not optional. Everyone drives over them, whereas the signs are more of a suggestion for following the speed limit. But whether or not it's heeded is up to the driver. Um, some other things we can do are striping. So on roadways that are a little wider than they need to be, it may feel more comfortable to drive at a higher speed because you have more room to maneuver. Perhaps you're able to see a little further ahead. Um, and that induces speeding subconsciously a lot of times. So we can stripe white edge lines at the sides of the road and make that available pavement for driving seem a little narrower. Again, this isn't going to physically affect the vehicles in any way. If I wanted to, I could drive all the way off to the right over the stripe. Certainly not ideal, but we're not physically narrowing the road. It's more just striping. Um, but it can both slow vehicle speeds as well as increase the comfort for pedestrians if there aren't sidewalks. It helps to kind of delineate a spot where you feel confident walking and hoping that vehicles wouldn't be driving in that space because of the line. Um, these work similar to the edge line narrowing, but it's applied to intersections. These are called bulb outs. So basically, they take an intersection that may be wider than it needs to be, and by being wider than it needs to be, you can take those turns a little faster. I think we all know that on really long curves, we're able to maintain a pretty high speed. But if we're making a really sharp 90, like if we were turning into a driveway, we'd have to slow way down to be able to make that sharp turn. So these are shooting for somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. We definitely want vehicles to still be able to use the intersection as intended, but we want people taking turns slow enough that if someone is crossing the street on the street that they're turning onto, they have time to see them and stop. Certainly, it's not good when vehicles make really fast turns and don't see if someone is crossing the road. A side benefit that these have is it does shorten the distance that pedestrians have to cross. So this picture in the kind of top left is a good example of that. Um, Used to, they would be exposed to vehicle traffic all the way from one sidewalk to the other, but now they're basically just crossing that 20 feet where vehicles are constrained to be. And then one last benefit in neighborhoods that have a lot of demand for street parking, we sometimes find that vehicles park too close to crosswalks and block the visibility of pedestrians using them. So in certain circumstances, these can be used to help enforce those existing parking rules that help people using the road and crossing it all be visible to each other, which can have safety benefits. On pretty wide roads, we can do what's called chicanes. Basically, this is where we take the center line of a roadway and zigzag it back and forth over the length of the road. This is another striping treatment, so it's not physically affecting the vehicles. It's more suggesting that they do these kind of zigzag maneuvers. But by doing those turns, they are slowing down. Um, it's intuitive that if it were just sort of a straightaway, you could um, go faster along the length of the street. The main disadvantage of these is they can affect the amount of on-street parking that's available, where a road may previously have had parking available on both sides. This would only have parking available on the side that it has zagged away from. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. These work similar to bulb outs by narrowing an intersection, but from the inside out and not the outside in. They essentially work like a roundabout, where if you were going right, you'd make your turn as usual. If you're going straight, you would sort of treat it like a median and just bend around it. And then if you were making a left turn, you'd start by going right, but then drive counterclockwise around the circle until you exited at the street you were turning onto. So those are all the tools. Next up, we've got a design concept to show you. But before we jump into that, I wanted to pause again and just see if anyone had questions or comments on the tools we've talked about so far. Okay. Um, so this is what we've got so far for East Cedar Lane. Um, Basically, we're proposing a series of 5 speed cushions spaced on average 400 feet apart. That's kind of the middle of the road spacing that NDOT uses on traffic calming streets. Um, we haven't proposed any narrowing chicanes or bulb outs, but I would like to hear from you all just some feedback, or if any of those other tools were really appealing, or if there are any intersections or things that you think we ought to look at or look out for when we go do our site visit. So essentially what's going to happen next is we're going to take the feedback we get tonight, go to East Cedar Lane, observe it for ourselves, and then finalize a design.
Hey, David, I think probably, in my opinion, the speed cushions are what's going to be successful for our street. We have a lot of people that park various places on both sides of the road. Um, and it is a pretty wide road, so I think the speed cushions is what's kind of really going to slow people down. But the intersection of Apache and East Cedar, we get a lot of people. There's a stop sign on Apache. A lot of people roll that stop sign, unfortunately, or they come almost all the way out to the intersection before they stop. So it would almost be nice to see a traffic circle there as well. I'm sure with the speed cushion right before it, it would probably slow it down, but
Yeah, that's great feedback. Certainly, we can evaluate that intersection for a traffic circle. Um, I would say more likely than not, it may not have enough room to um,
Mhm.
allow all the vehicles that need to use it to make those left turns. But I would happily do like a test fit, and we'll be out there and see if it's going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions or thoughts? The next slide I've got is sort of what happens next, and how we might vote on the program or vote on the proposed design. But I'm happy to answer or listen to really anything you all have on your mind. Cool. Well, we certainly can come back to the slide if necessary, but I'll go ahead and move on. So this is a flow chart of the full life cycle of a traffic calming streets project. Basically, it starts with an application, as you all may know. Um, we then did that 2 month or so prioritization and selection process before announcing this fall's group of traffic calming streets. And now we're at that red circle, the neighborhood meeting. Basically, we are presenting our first draft of the design, hearing feedback from all of you. Um, and really just kind of getting to know the project a little better before we go out and finalize anything. But next, we're going to do that field review. So we're going to go to East Cedar Lane, bring our measurement tools, make sure that we're fully understanding like where the hills are, how wide the street is at the different points, and then observing it qualitatively just to make sure that there's nothing, where we may be missing from Google Street View and Google Maps and all that. Once we have a final design, that'll essentially look like this, but in a little greater detail. So we'll kind of show exactly where this cushion goes, how many are across, um, that nature of things. And once we have those ready, we can do one of two things. We can schedule a second meeting just like this one, where we kind of present those plans, recap a lot of what we talked about before, in case anyone missed this meeting. And then if there's any additional like design changes that come out of that, we will have time to make them. If that doesn't seem like something you all would like to do, we can also post those plans to NDOT's website and begin the balloting process. So what that looks like is we would send out postcards to everyone who is invited to this meeting, and they'd be able to follow the instructions on them to both view the final construction plans and then vote, would you like the project to happen or would you rather the project not happen? A successful ballot is when 66% of people who voted vote favorably. So it's not 66% of everyone on the street. It's just like a regular election where, only the votes that are submitted are considered. Should that be successful, we'll go ahead and order the materials, get some work orders together, and the project will enter the construction queue. That is a pretty long line at the moment, so it would take between 8 and 10 months from giving the thumbs up to having that project installed. But we are, I think, seeing some improvement on those delivery times. Certainly, NDOT is doing everything they can to speed these up and get through that backlog a little more quickly. But right now, that 8 to 10 month is kind of our best guess at the delivery time. To zoom in to those ballot postcards a little bit, I want to make sure that everyone online sort of knows what is coming and what to look for. So basically, we will send a mailer similar to the one that invited you all to the meeting this evening. It'll have a QR code to get to NDOT's website and that ballot form, and it'll have a unique ID code that'll be asked for in the form. Or if you'd like to vote on the phone, you can call the number and vote that way. But that ID code is sort of how we make sure that all the votes are coming in correctly. There aren't any like duplicates or anything like that. We'll have the ballot period open for 6 weeks. We think that's a pretty good middle ground between being enough time that anyone who would like to vote has the opportunity to. It's also a little bit of time to kind of talk to your neighbors, make sure they know that they'll be getting one of these postcards in the mail. But we don't like these projects to kind of just drag on indefinitely. So we do have a hard deadline for voting. That date will be reported on that ballot postcard. So we think it should be pretty easy to understand when it's going to close. And then, like I mentioned earlier, 2/3 is the threshold for moving forward with the project. We do see that almost all of the traffic calming projects we propose do get there. Certainly, if you've risen to the top of that 500 plus street list, we understand that there is some serious speeding occurring. A little bit about the ballot zone. It is all of the owners of the yellow parcels shown on this map. So we use the same mailing tool that the zoning office does. It's the Metro Nashville Register of Deeds. So we're basically sending the mail to the address that's listed on those property records. So we want to make sure anyone is aware that should that address be different than where you live, and you want to be engaged and vote in this process, maybe look out for that, or you could also look up your own property's record and see where that mail is going. Churches and schools will each get one vote. And it's only those properties abutting the affected right-of-way. Owners with multiple properties will get one vote, so we'll see like duplicates and kind of weed out, not send anyone multiple ballots. Any properties that don't have buildings on them, I think I see a couple of them up toward the northern end of the project. We know that no one's living there, so we'll not send mail to empty lots. And then any like operating businesses, if you were like a auto mechanic or a sandwich shop or something like that, those aren't really the properties that we're soliciting votes from. Any questions about that or anything else I've covered? Now's the time to kind of ask anything at all. Feel free to use the chat or come off mute. Just let me know. This is my contact information up on the screen. So should anything occur and you'd like to reach out to me after this meeting, you're welcome to email me. I will ask you'll also copy NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That keeps kind of the whole team in the loop in case I'm off somewhere and someone else needs to fill in. But we're usually pretty responsive to emails and happy to get your feedback that way as well.
David, you probably said it, I'm sorry, but when will those ballots be mailed out?
So it depends. And actually, that's a good segue to basically deciding as a group if we would prefer to have the second neighborhood meeting, or is everyone sort of feeling like they'd rather just view those plans when it's time to vote?
Hi, Andy here. Yeah, I'd go for the letter.
Okay.
And I think I was going to say in another meeting to bring the HOA community into it.
Oh, got it. What is the HOA community? Is that
It's
the?
pretty much the majority of East Cedar Lane.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Got
from
it.
Neely's Bend to Apache Lane is everybody who resides on the street is in an HOA.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So are you thinking that like not enough of the people residing here got the invitation to come?
Well, they got the invitation, but I think if they knew we were voting, that they would be present.
Okay, sure.
I don't know if anybody else on the call feels differently and we want to do majority or whatever.
I feel like that would be the case too. We should have a meeting so people will come and actually vote for it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds totally fine to me. Yeah, it doesn't take that much longer in the grand scheme of things to have that second meeting. And if you think that there are more people who would be or would benefit from having the information we talk about tonight, we're more than happy to do it. So we'll go ahead and make that the plan. I'll take note of that now so I don't forget. And then yeah, once we're getting close to having that design finished up, we'll reach back out to you, Nora, since you scheduled this meeting, as well as Council Member Hancock, and get another date on the books to have that second meeting and then go over to the ballot. Any other questions? Sounds like no. Well, thank you all so much. Up on the screen right now is the QR code that will lead you to Nashville's traffic calming website. NDOT, of course, also has some social media presence that you can go to find out some more general information about their goings on. But yeah, if no one else has questions, we can call it a night. Thank you all again so much for your time. And yeah, we'll get that design finished up and meeting 2 scheduled so we can keep this moving forward.
Thank
Thanks,
you for the
David.
meeting. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Of course. Y'all have a good night.